Hello, I'm Jan Duncan. Welcome to our Texas College 60-minute segment. Today, I am here with Mrs. Linda Simmons-Henry. Mrs. Henry serves us at Texas College as the librarian, but there's a very special little known fact about Ms. Henry. She is a professional certified genealogist. And today we are going to learn about the study of genealogy and why it is so important in this day and time. Welcome, Mrs. Henry. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Dr. Duncan. I'm glad to be here to share with you these genealogicals, exploring this type of subject. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Tell us about the story, shall I say, of genealogy and the study of it, and why it is so important, particularly in this day and time where we unfortunately have lost loved ones, persons have moved away in different areas. Uh, People have been asked to serve in military positions overseas for quite an extended period of time. Can you tell me how this study impacts our human existence?
This is very, very important for us to begin and also to continue to explore our genealogical tracings of our family history. And oftentimes we look at the why or what the way we behave or do things, and sometimes it is as a result of your genealogical genes or what have you may have in your bodies or what have you that has been lingering along with your family history, and exploring that and looking at genealogical explorations of study. I did my first study several years ago, many, many years ago, and it was out of curiosity, wanted to know more, wanted to discover why family members are a part of your family and how that came to be and the dynamics beyond that. In terms of looking at documentations and then being able to have factual information of how you are connected to your family name in itself. So I am so excited and a part of being a librarian myself professionally, and wanted to have that, I guess, that desire of discovery. Curious about where you are, where you came from, and who you are, how you behave in terms of with your, I call it your genes, in which you do your discoveries and what have you. Okay.
Many times in the study of psychology or biology, when we get to the subject matter of genes in our DNA, you mentioned why things happen in terms of our lifestyles, the choices that we make. Do you think our genealogical background has an effect on our personality and our lifestyles?
Yes, many times you think, well, why is it that we do either perform this way or what have you? Sometimes it's in your genes or in something that you have been a part of or used to based on maybe family stories or way back in traditional that your ancestors have done, and you're still practicing those traditions today. It's in your genes, and you want to discover that and make sure out of even with me, the explorations of learning how or why these actions are or these are a part of your life and your everyday life itself. And
Well, Mrs. Henry, where do we start? I mean,
this
you see ancestry.com, you see various commercialized packages that you can purchase. And we're going to go into a couple of questions that I have about that as we get further into the subject. But where do we start? Do we start with our grandparents? Do we start with our elders in the neighborhood? Where do we start?
One of the steps that I always share in my workshops, my genealogical activities that I share with high school students or college students or what have you, when they want to explore their ancestors, you start with yourself, and knowing, and then work backwards. You start on either side, your father's side or your mother's side, that linkage, you know. And then you see how far you can go back. You say where you start, how far can you go back and discover this, and then couple with that, there's a strong emphasis on oral history, those stories that your grandmother has shared with you years ago, or that your family members, and trying to connect that with the documents that you discover. And I work closely with census records because they are taken every 10 years, looking at who is listed as the head of household, the family names that has been traditionally shared with you in your family. So one, you work backwards and see how far you can go back with your knowledge in terms of. Two, you try to interview the eldest person in your family and see how they can take it back another level that you may not be able to. Those stories are the wonderful stories that connect to the actual documents that you will discover as you begin to do and journey on your genealogical search. Um, and that's what we start off with. We don't work on both sides of your family at the same time. Try to work on maybe your father's side or your mother's side and see how far you can go back. Can you name your grandparents? Can you name your great grandparents? And then what stories that is transcend in your family that you would like to continue to share or that has been shared to you? Yeah.
Okay, so Mrs. Henry, if we start with ourselves, what if, like in our viewing audience, and as you were speaking on the subject, starting with yourself, what if you feel like, well, I only know what my parents have told me, what my grandmother has told me? What about individuals that feel like, do I have enough information to start with myself?
In the African American communities, either with doing genealogical research or history is very vital to you as you began to do your research. The stories, and connecting. Okay, if my grandparents shared with me about Uncle Joe or who's listed on these census records, it brings about the connections and making you feel complete that, okay, this is what it is, in terms of going to your census records, looking at some of your birth and death certificates, your marriage license, to connect those stories. Because if Uncle John got married to Sally John, and you have no records and all you have is the traditional story, it's a joy when you go and look at the document, the deeds of records that shows the actual marriage license and when they got married, and the connections to make it more authentic for you. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, just a few real life questions. One for myself. For persons, my mother was born in the 40s. She
Okay.
was born in 1941. And there was always a controversy on which day was her actual birthday. Was it September 4th or if it was September 5th? Because she was born by a midwife. And during that time, that was a normal practice in the community. And my aunt would say, well, I know it was Labor Day because it was a parade and XYZ was going on. So things that happen in our lives, does that have an impact
It does.
on
Go ahead.
no, on the events that may impact tracing our history.
Exactly. It does. It also document because many times the midwives did not turn the records in on, accurately on the exact day or the document or what have you. And sometimes you will find that someone was born on a different day or a different month. And however, once you discover that and see what is official the document, usually that's what you go with. But then again, you're right. Family members will have stories of when they were born, or they were born around Easter, and sometimes they will name their child Easter, because it's a time period in which they were born. And it is very difficult sometimes when we have midwives that does these deliveries, and they sometimes don't put the accurate date. So you have some dates that is sort of off of what have you, but it's not usually that much. But anyway, to solidify what the dates are, you will probably you look at the census records, or you look at the death certificate that was reported.
Okay.
To go by, because you know what? Some days say, well, I was born on March the 1st, but then my birth certificate says March the 5th.
Yes, I've heard that.
And so most of the time in census and census recordings, you go to what is actually a document, the federal the document that is official, like a certified birth certificate, or certified death certificate, or certified, marriage license, or what have you.
So what happens, or what would have happened, and I've heard these stories from elders as well, when particularly during segregation, when colored, as they call them, hospitals were burned down. Were those records destroyed? What happened in those type of cases?
In most cases, if it was burned down, there's just lost records, and you would have to go through census records based on to see if that person was an infant or a child that was listed as head of the household by the father, or what have you. In some cases, you can get the records. You're right. You can get the records from there, even if it was burned. Okay. But there is a period, I think in 1880, 1890s, that much of the state federal records were burned altogether. And genealogical research, more importantly, for African Americans, came up with a roadblock, for, if you will. But there are other means of that you can get those records and be able to identify as a documented piece as well.
Okay. Now we're going to get into some subjects that may be quite taboo, if you will. So when we're tracing our history, and we have members in our family, and this is particularly for persons of color, one person may appear brown-skinned, another may appear fair-skinned, one person may, it's the mother and father both have dark hair tones, and then you have a child that is born with reddish light brown hair, or a different color of a different eye color. How do you advise persons who have these kinds of questions about their ancestry?
Okay, in some cases there may be some rarity pieces as you begin to explore those types of genes that may come up in a child that's born that may have not appeared, I'm going to say maybe 2 or 3 generations before. And all of a sudden you will have a child that may have blue eyes, or that may have brown hair or red hair, or what have you. In some cases that if it's that you look at that as probably as a document that a process that may occur in your lineage of your family. but it doesn't mean that it's a mix or what have you, and it could be. So those are curiosities or stories that may occur, and that's when you come with your genealogical or history and stories that may have played during that time and caused that to happen. It is not always the case that it may have been another DNA or another family member or what have you.
Or someone was cheating. Okay.
I didn't want to say that.
Just go ahead. Let's be clear.
But again, it can happen. It can happen and everything. And that's what we look at in terms of our DNA. When we go in to have the DNA test and you come out and the results may give indication that is the right father that is married to the that's happened to have, and then also as you had mentioned before earlier, the new discoveries that you need to be prepared of discovery that the results that you may get, in terms of, suppose you get the results from DNA tests that says that he's not the father, or that these genes come from maybe another family member or another family or another person in the community. So those are things that you need to be prepared for, to get the answers to those new discoveries once the results come back from the DNA exams. You follow me?
Yes, ma'am, I do. And which brings me to this question. When I was preparing for the interview, I have a few friends that have mentioned the disappointment they felt. They learned that they had been adopted, and they tried to trace their biological parents, and they felt quite disappointed when they traced their family history, or they actually had an opportunity to contact their biological parents, and they learned personal information that was quite disappointing. What kind of advice can you give in those type of cases?
Again, you need to be prepared. When you begin to explore genealogical research, you need to be prepared for the results, and that the results that you are journeying through and seeking to find may not always be at your satisfaction or what have you. You need to also understand that these discoveries that you have, and how you're going to be able to deal with it once you find the correct answers. DNA in, I'm going to say 2005 up now, is becoming more accurate than it was years ago. DNA tests, you see that phenomenon going on now, that somebody wants to send and get their DNA tested and send the kit off, and they're looking and dying to get the results back. Then what? So then what is that you have to be prepared, because the answers that you may want to hear may not be the answers that you get, and what have you. DNA, and that, like I said, is a very popular initiative now, that everybody wants to discover and find out where they came from and what have you. But suppose you didn't come from where grandmama told you that you came from Africa and you came from Ghana. And then you get the DNA test and it's altogether different. You may become from Europe or what have you. Being able to understand and accept those new discoveries for DNA, because that is what is really going in terms of today's documentations for this. And also, once you do the DNA, it is stored, that allows you that you can come back and look at that and see where you actually came from as well.
Okay. My sister actually took one of those commercial DNA tests from ancestry.com, and it brought back results that she had DNA or genetic ties to the Bantu tribe, and it gave percentages on a printout of various origins or populations that she had genes from. And of course, we have the same parents, but in order for her to discover more, she had to pay a larger fee to get more information. Are those type of results which are commercialized, do you feel as though they have any validity?
Right. No, in some cases, I mean, my answer is yes and no. Some cases that is I'm not saying a scam, but it is a way to make many dollars of funds from this audience of curiosity of individuals who want to find new discoveries about their ancestors and or either about their genes or what they have and the way they do things and the information itself. But there is I guess a marketing piece of this genetic finding your DNA and getting these results. But once you buy into it, at the beginning, then they go take it to a next level of what have you. At some point, you're going to have to realize that it is not feasible for you to get the information that you're having and making it short, because there is a market out there to make money to explore this type of initiative for, more important, for African Americans, more importantly, and African American discoveries, because we have always known that we could not do research beyond 1870, and it was difficult for us because we were in slavery and we was owned by the slave master, which was listed as property. So, and then when they took inventory, you had all these lists of names or what have you. But it's not to say you can't go back farther. It's to find, and it depends on how well records were kept in that particular state, and on African Americans and slave records as well.
I have a question from a gentleman whose family took it upon themselves as a project, and they sponsored one particular brother to trace his history. Mind you, he had 17 brothers and sisters in his family, in his immediate family, and they took it upon themselves, according to his question or email that he was curious about, and traced their family history. They found out that their elders were slaves, and they were traced back through the records, and his final destination ended up at the Library of Congress to find records of his ancestors being property, as you mentioned. And here again, it was quite costly for this family to follow this as a project. And of course, they were disappointed. They thought that they could go on back to Africa or the motherland, and there were no records beyond that point. What is your advice in this case?
Well, you know what, and that is similar to my family. They identified and picked Linda to try to explore our family history. And I went on this journey to, number one, having a background in library science, and always be what we call, curiosity of facts and, and documentations and what. My family asked me, okay, Linda, let's go on this journey and let's see how well you can find our ancestors, okay? And so first my curiosity was, I wanted to do something for African American families all together and to set an example of how they can follow as well. But I was asked by my immediate family if we could identify where and how our name, my maiden name, how we got our name, where the records are. Here's what our family members told us in terms of, I was saying earlier, you work backwards and see how far you can go back, and then being able to piece the documents together with the traditional stories that have been shared in our family, and what have you. So I was that one person that they didn't hire, but they asked and said, we're going to see how far we can go with our family history. During that journey, I did take some time out, and at that time I became a certified archivist, and also discover all African American African that have done their traditional family history. And I don't know if you can see this. This is a document about African Americans. This is a book. I don't know if you see it. But anyway, it's about African Americans, historical African American family histories in the state of North Carolina. So it was a 500 families. This is a mighty thick book, here. I don't know if you see it, but
no, ma'am, we cannot see it, but we can upload it. Okay, we can see the seal.
Yes,
it looks like a pretty.
This is the book
document
that I wrote on genealogy.
Oh, fantastic.
African American genealogy in the state of North Carolina, and that we had about 560 families that was included in this book here. After we did the research for discovery of African Americans family linkage that is a part of their family in North Carolina. So in doing that, it helps that if you are able to get the factual information and documentation to go along with that.
Mrs. Henry, we cannot really get a clear picture of the document on Zoom, but we will create a link to the book to be attached on our page in addition to this segment. And if persons should want to take a look or dive deeper into the subject, we will do that. And how long, just give us a view of how long it actually took to go through the process to finalize the project. Were there any highs and lows emotionally when the persons you interviewed or gathered information from, how did they feel about the overall project? Because how many pages is that book?
It's over 562 pages.
Wow. Okay.
But however, it is a combination of maybe about 400 different families that was telling their story about their genealogical journey and how they documented their family in this book itself. This book was a labor of love. Again, having the interest in documented African American life through genealogical journeys of other African Americans. It was very exciting for me. It took almost 2 years for us to do the research and compile all of these family stories. And then also, I don't know, and I wish that I'd tell you, I received a call from Alex Haley, and he was on the project. He was excited about the project that I was doing in North Carolina, and then he put the forward to the book. And I just want to, just before he died, he gave the forward to this book himself. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to try to see it. Him here. He did the forward to the book, and where am I? Right here. You see him? You can
what was he like in person? Yes, ma'am. We can see it clearly.
Okay.
What was he like in person? He's famously known for
he was very excited because he just came out of that series of Roots.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was doing the research in North Carolina on trying to document the genealogical journeys of African Americans in North Carolina. And having said that, he was very supportive in that. And you said, what was it like? It was a very, very interesting, and also, wanting to make sure that these families got their story put in print, to be able to have these information documented. And it is in the Library of Congress book, this book, as well as at Texas College on the shelf at the book, to this copy is, so you can go to the library right now and be able to pick the copy that I donated when I first came there, Okay. So, to be able to share those stories, and then the journey was, it was exciting to me because I love to read. I love to be able to discover documents that are factual. and also looking at the property or whether or not how people, individual family members gain property with the grantees and the grantor records and what have you in this thing. So the journey, as you asked the question, the journey was really great, and a sense of appreciation once the book came out of this. And this is one or two books that I've done on African American genealogical research. Okay, and but this is my pride and joy because of Ellis Haley's endorsement and support for this as well, you know. Okay.
Yes, ma'am, that is just phenomenal. Were there any highs and lows when families begin to trace their history in terms of emotionally, perhaps family tragedies that may have occurred, and having to tell the story, families have to face those kinds of issues again?
Yes, and then you have those stories and the highs and lows. And let me answer that question for you. The highs and lows is how well or how you were able to accept those tragedies that occurred in your family, because everybody's family was coming up with it was not the same. And so being able to share that, and coupled with being able to move on in terms of accepting this as a low, and being able to take those pieces and memories and being able to move on and with your life, what have you. And also coupled with that is to be able to share those stories, because I know in everybody's family you would say, well, I'm gonna say he was killed or he was drowned. The family was destroyed. They was sharecroppers, and the house was burned down, and we lost 3. And receiving those names, being able to keep them connected, of those stories is a great deal, to help with this.
What about organizations? Do they have a genealogical history, an organization or church as a unit? Is there a history that follows organizations or institutions? I'm sure, but I'm curious.
Yes. Well, there is always, there has been, in fact, in the state of North Carolina, we had an organization called the North Carolina Genealogical Society. I was the president at one time, and then we moved on, different presidents that was a part and had a strong interest in preserving those documents. And also, and you're right, that organization, I'm also a member of the National Afro-American Genealogical Society out of Washington, D.C. They have conferences as well. I haven't been in several years, but anyway, we have a interest group that allows us to share those stories and share those journeys and how they were able to get the documents that they need to justify their family history as well. And it is a labor of love. It is curiosity. It was many, as I participate in the various workshops and the various conferences, you find that you have quite a few of genealogists or interest family members who want to explore and want to find out, whether or not that, the family stories that are traditionally told in your family is exactly what it is in terms of federal documents and documents. Did my grandfather and his wife, did they actually married? Or there's a list of federal documents that are called cohabitation records, where family members live together on the same plantation, and they was what you call cohabitation records, and then they was considered married. And later on, after the 1870 census, they finally became, as couples, itself. And you have different documents. You have the slave records, the inventory list of the slave master. You have the birth and death certificates. But what happens before 1913, before the death certificates and the birth certificates were formed? Then you have these journals, and then the Bible. You rely on the Bible, what your family members have written in the Bible, that gives you a name, a place, or something of that. So those Bible records are just as important, So what does the African American family or individual do when you no longer have, you don't have those kinds of documents, and you only rely on the Bible or those traditional stories that have been passed on in your family? You know, you're seeking, out of curiosity, you want to seek and see that they actually get married, did it, and looking at the documents itself and seeking you can find them as well. So that is very important to us. And looking at the census records, I would say the census record, I would say your oral history, interviewing your family members, and I mentioned starting with yourself and working backwards on one family line, your father's side or your mother's side. You know, when the movie Roots came out, that it was a large interest of African Americans wanting to go and discover, and look at it. It started out, that's when a lot of African Americans, including myself, wanted to know, okay, where's my father, or where is my grandparents, or where did they come from? All the questions that maybe we had not, been a part of or either expressing, then that it was here. So I just gather my total interest, although I was in college at the time, my total interest was to discover a sense of awareness, a sense of wanting to piece these puzzles that has been traditionally, told in my family or in the families of these African Americans, that could share and tell the stories and find it. It brings joy when you can find, oh, there is my father's name, our grandfather's name, and there is a death certificate, or there is a marriage license that they actually got married, that you can share, And that's why my brothers and them say, okay, Linda, you can do the research and let us know, and bringing the documents back and displaying them. And what I did at a family reunion,
Wow.
the connections, and then you'd see the gleam in their eyes to know that they have a document and they see a name of a family member. So it was an exhibit too, to share those documents that they had never seen before, and bringing that to life.
Well, Mrs. Henry, in today's time of COVID and individually, we've been isolated. And now more than ever before, unfortunately, young persons as well as elders have passed on because of the COVID situation. Do you advise us to start now? Because, for a time, we could not have family reunions. We could not have our traditional gathering. What advice do you leave with us?
The advice I would give to you is keeping on with the genealogical search, and with hopes that eventually you will be able to share those stories or share those documents with your family members. The advice I would have is that is that not only will, with this COVID initiative now, and being at home, to allow you opportunities to be able to do discoveries of these documents. Now, more than before, you have census records online. You have a database which we subscribe to. It's called TechShare. TechShare has a heritage database within those number of databases it have. So I'm oftentimes even helping with the students wanting to know how they can begin that research and begin looking at those census records, or begin looking at some of those documents that allows you to make the connections. So those databases are available, and you can do the journey of your family history on within TechShare and everything. I am so excited too that not only with the databases that we have here at Texas College, that it allows students to will have an opportunity to explore and venture and see what they can find that is documented in those documents that are available for them.
Yes, ma'am. And I found a quote in my search in preparing for the interview today. And it reads, if you are lucky enough to be a genealogist, you are lucky enough. Do you consider yourself lucky to be a genealogist?
I'm lucky. I mean, yes and no. I think I am. I'm a. Let me put it this way. A vessel here to share and to share the stories. And I think that with the career that I have gone into, and that is librarianship, archives, preservation, history of African American experience, all that coupled with an opportunity to continue to share the stories and to share it with the students here at Texas College, as well as students or members of the families, or either just in general. As a certified genealogist, I am so excited because one, it's a labor of love for me. It's something that I enjoy doing. So I don't want to stop here. And although we have new initiatives, new ways of getting to these records a little bit better than we did 15 years ago, it's there, you know. And also how to capture it and store it into a new mechanism of technology. And that's with us today. So yes, I am. I am so proud. I am so proud that I can continue and will continue to share and tell the story based on my experience as a genealogist, and also just letting them know you can do it too. You can be it.
Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Henry. This has really been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing the information with us. We will create a link to your book. And also, I found 100 family history interview questions that we'll also provide as a link as 2 takeaways from this segment. I really appreciate you sharing this information with me today. And I hopefully it will be cherished among the Texas College community during our homecoming week as an intellectual segment for us. And thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and it's been just an honor to know you and have daily interaction with you. And it has been my personal as well as my professional honor to work with you.
And
Thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much, Dr. Duncan, for allowing me and having me here and giving me a topic, a subject that I love so well. And I thank you so much. And thank you too for having it a part of the homecoming celebration, intellectual note that will benefit not only the students, the faculty, and the administration as well. So thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Great job.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Have a fantastic day.
Okay.
And thank you to the Texas College community for joining us for another segment of our Texas College 60 Minutes featuring Mrs. Linda Simmons-Henry, librarian at Texas College.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.